Hello. Many of us aspired to be internet celebrities. This guy couldn't even imagine anything like this. He didn't even know the internet existed until lately. Frank's life had basically stalled after returning from the Vietnam War, but everything is about to change significantly. Frank grew up in a very ordinary family, helping his mother and father on a farm in California his entire childhood, but the simple life did not bother him. On the contrary, he learned to enjoy the simple things, such as his relationship with Lindsay, whom he hoped to marry, but the young couple's plans were disrupted by the Vietnam War. Frank swore to return from the war as quickly as possible, but his time at the front ended up being longer than intended. The youngster had spent a total of 7 years in a foreign place, including a year as a prisoner of the enemy, when he was tortured and interrogated but eventually freed. Frank had to return to his home country after leaving the hospital due to an injury. Frank dashed to his girlfriend's place, only to be met with a surprising surprise. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Guess what Frank realized? If he couldn't anticipate happiness in his personal life anytime soon, he could at least build a career. Initially, he applied to the police academy, which he hoped to be admitted to because of his combat experience, but was turned down due to a major injury. Then he went on interviews, where he was repeatedly rejected owing to his lack of academic education. Finally, Frank had to fend for himself, so he started selling hot dogs. The street before he realized it 40 years have gone, but all will change one day. Frank is taking his usual route that day. When two skinheads board a bus, they begin harassing a black passenger, demanding that he make way. He denies the skinheads who are about to beat up the old man, but Frank intervenes at first, merely to scare the guys off, and swears he's not going to fight them, but they appear to be clamoring for a beating. The bus passengers applaud Frank. He is unaware that one of them has videotaped the entire scene. The video goes viral, and Frank is dubbed "Badass." His face is painted and printed on walls. Cops in t-shirts give Frank a ride home. Reporters lie to each other to have an interview with the viral internet celebrity, and most of all, his mother is so proud of him. But the ecstasy does not last. Long before Frank's mother passes away and leaves him, he lives in a spacious house, and her pet dog is a family heirloom. Frank now has one and only one love. He had left behind his best friend Klondike, who was also a military veteran. Klondike assists Frank in settling into his new home, and the men discuss their wartime history, with Klondike tearfully thanking his comrade for saving his life on the battlefield a long time ago. Their circumstances will finally improve since Frank has unexpectedly become a local star, and Klondike invites a friend to place a mystery flash drive in his safe, an old-fashioned technology. Frank sees for the first time and leaves the store to acquire cigarettes. Klondike comes across two thugs in a car. "They demanded the flash drive from me." When Klondike pretended not to understand what they were saying, they put a gun to his head. The man knocked the assailants to the ground and was going to flee when later, Frank is called in for bodies. He requested the cops to do all in their power to find his best friend's killers and then went outside to get a drink. Frank is approached by a neighbor who sympathizes with her loss and informs him that her brother was just murdered in almost the same location as Klondike. The woman laments that the local police do nothing to investigate crimes like these, and Frank later reveals all of this to his detective acquaintance. The cop guarantees that the cops will do everything they can to catch Frank a bit later. A white boy has lately been murdered in their community, and the culprit has been captured instantly. The man goes to the police station the next day, frustrated by the lack of progress. In this scenario, he is told that the officers are apparently quite busy during the day. Then at night, Frank understands he can't rely on the police for assistance, so he travels to the crime scene himself. 3 pieces of evidence are discovered: a fired bullet casing, a chain, and a pendant with an image of a girl. Frank travels to the sole gun store in town to find out what kind of gun the bullet was fired from. Based on what the local consultant tells him, he told me that these shells are only used in military and special agent guns, and he doesn't have any. Nevertheless, the salesman recognizes the girl from the necklace he discovered and informs him that she is the wife of a black man named Terrence who lives a few blocks away. The consultant instructs Frank on how to get to his house. An weary girl opens the door. Frank discovers from their conversation that Terrence hasn't been home to his wife and 3 children in a long time, and she hasn't seen her husband in weeks. Finally, the girl reveals that her friends recently spotted Terrence on a basketball court and asked Frank to give him a good talking to from her. As Frank goes to the basketball court to ask where he can find Terrence, the locals refuse to tell him anything. This is when the signature badass punch comes into play. Terry's pals has taken on a fresh tone. Expose the coordinates of a specific Ronaldo, who may be able to give information at the address. Frank comes upon a weird man dressed in what appears to be a Holy Father costume. When Ronaldo's neighbor, who mistook Frank for a thief, learns the reality, he tells him which pub it is. Every morning, Ronaldo visits in the evening. Frank observes an awful situation involving one of his neighbors, a young man. On the doorstep, a couple is arguing loudly. The man departs, leaving Amber alone with her kid Martin. Frank brings the girl to his home to wash the wound on her face caused by her violent spouse. They all have a good chat and enjoy their time together. Maybe I'll prepare you something to eat one day. Franco is looking for Ronaldo at the pub the next morning. The guys on the first floor notice him and make their feelings known, that they are not pleased to see him. Frank must demonstrate his combat abilities. When asked about Terrence, he returns to the second floor and eventually finds Ronaldo. Ronaldo swiftly pulls out a knife and claims he's not going to tell him anything. But after the guy sticks Ronaldo's head out onto the street, he quickly gives up, saying that Terrence has been dating a certain female who performs massages at a nearby salon. Satisfied, Frank departs. On his way home, the man is stopped by, according to a cop acquaintance, tales of Frank's exploits are already circulating across the town, and the chief was on the verge of issuing an arrest warrant for him, and the cop could barely stop him at the last second. Frank responds that he cannot stand still and observe the cop's colleagues relax and do nothing about his best friend's death. The officer responds that it is not Frank's duty and that he will not assist him. When Frank gets into his house, he notices that it has been vandalized. Before he can turn around, a large man grabs him from behind the stranger. But Frank pretends not to understand and throws the uninvited guest out the window before going to his neighbor. Martin requests to view the contents of the flash drive Klondike gave him. It includes a map of the town as well as various building permits and contact information. Frank is unsure what his friend has to do with this, but remembers the peculiar nickname Panther. Later, Frank goes to the Asia massage parlor, which Ronaldo informs him about, and makes an appointment with Tatiana, who is perplexed as to why. He requested a session with her, and then Frank informs her that he is looking for Terrence. I just realized I'm double booked, and the female freaked out. Diane will be here in a few minutes to complete the task. Once Tatiana has ended her duty, Frank follows her to her house, but the instant he tries to enter via the window, he is observed by a neighbor who does not believe Frank's fairy stories about being Tatiana's boyfriend and demands that he come closer. He quickly alters his attitude after identifying the stranger as the badassery on the television. He not only does he lets Frank depart, but he reminds him that his woman never closes the back door. Frank goes up to the second story and finds Tatiana and Terrence sleeping. He shoves Terrence's hand into the waste shredder and demands to know who killed Klondike and why. Terrence yelled in pain and soon surrenders. He says Klondike was killed by his partner Sebastian, and they were both simply performing their jobs. What they had been told. Terrence initially refuses to reveal who is issuing the commands, but after another round of torture with the shredder, he divulges Panther's name and location. By the way, your wife has a message for you. Frank returns home to see the couple next door bickering once more. This time, though, the man is more forceful. Until Frank steps in and begs him to leave. Amber is alone when her spouse suspects her of cheating on him with a neighbor. Frank quickly twists his arm and sends him away satisfied. Amber collapses into Frank's arms and tells him he looks tired. She proposes that he get some rest and then come over for supper, especially since her son Martin is spending the night at a friend's house, and Frank is also staying at a friend's house. Of course, he has no time to sleep. He gets all worked up for dinner, puts on his nicest suit, and goes out to purchase flowers. Amber is captivated by his new appearance, and they enjoy a pleasant dinner in a fragrant garden. Frank is overjoyed with the woman and the handmade cuisine. She is overjoyed to finally be able to cook. For someone who appreciates it, confesses to Frank that when she married, her spouse was very different, and now he has changed forever. They sit on the terrace and chat, but when the long-awaited time for a kiss finally arrives, Martin's friend turns out to be grounded, and the sleepover is cancelled. But Frank and Amber are unconcerned. They are all having a great time. Frank offers to have them stay at his apartment at the end of the evening. Although their house's front door is shattered, the badass's big day has arrived. First, he approaches his cop acquaintance and hands him the flash drive. The guy says there's important information on it that got Klondike killed, and asks his friend to look after the dog if anything happens to him. Then Frank goes to church and confesses to a priest because he's about to commit a serious sin, and finally in the evening Frank goes to the warehouse whose location Terrence had revealed to him. Off slightly more than you can shoot, Frank accuses Panther of murdering him. The mobster responds by saying he is his best friend. Was merely punishing Klondike for stealing something extremely valuable to him. He demands Frank's flash drive. Frank is no longer terrified by torture because he has gone through it many years ago, so he remains firm and does not reveal anything. Panther eventually loses patience. Tells his subordinates to finish what they started and then leave. The mafioso has deduced that Frank's lover is waiting for him at home, and he has decided to pay her a visit. What he doesn't realize is that Frank has previously devised a strategy and has a box of matches in his pocket. When Frank is liberated from his shackles, he captures Panther, who is now without a vehicle, and battles him hand to hand. The mobster wounds him with a weapon he found on the floor and flees. Panther stops a bus near the warehouse, kicks the driver out, and drives away. Frank notices this and switches buses, which the other driver accepts gladly because he recognized the attitude after nearly being involved in an accident. Frank informs Panther, who manages to depart. Our hero is provoked by the gangster. He slams against his opponent's head to head, and Frank can't take it any longer and takes a turn. His bus collides with Panther, who then collides with the train. Fortunately, they both survive. The mafia flees, and Frank limps. Along the journey, he encounters the same skinheads who made him famous. They despise him for making them laugh, stalk for others, and fantasize about retaliation and creating a new film in which they are victorious, but it doesn't work out quite well. Panther, meanwhile, has already entered the house and confronts Amber with a knife. Yet he doesn't have time to even touch her, because Frank appears on the doorstep and throws the outlaw against the wall. They end up in the street, and Frank falls to the ground for a few more moments until Panther beats him to a pulp if it weren't for Amber, who hops onto the thug's back, allowing her beloved time to rise up, and Frank ultimately defeats the enemy. The neighbors cheer him, and Amber requests that he allow her to treat his wounds as he once did for her. Whoa, I've never had a lady save me before. The next day, a piece on local TV reintroduces the badass. Only this time he didn't simply beat up random skinheads, but he also solved one of the town's most serious corruption cases involving Mayor Williams and one of the country's most deadly gangs. Frank was awarded an honorary police officer for his heroic effort, and he now brings Amber and Martin together to live happily ever after. You know, I think I genuinely found the best day of my life. Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that more fantastic retellings can be released as frequently as possible. Thank you very much.